What's up, Internet? You're tuning in episode 100. Max just immediately leaned out of frame. I'm like, you guys ready? And I say, let's... And he immediately, he just whoop.
I didn't know you needed me for that bit. Sorry.
I'm leaving this in. What's up? You're back on episode 118 of the Steam Deck podcast. Blitzkrieg Games weekly gaming podcast, all about Valve's portable PC powerhouse, the Steam Deck. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie, joined by my very good friends and co-hosts, Mr. Stephen Radford.
Hello, hello.
And Mr. Max Wright.
Ahoy, ahoy.
What's going on, boys? Welcome back to the show.
Yeah, it's good to be back.
It's good to be back. Last week off, and now I am back. Yeah.
Yeah, Steve talked some shit, actually. I don't know if you listened to the beginning of that episode. You might want to...
I said nothing.
I did think that... I did mean to bring this up, and thanks for reminding me. I do think you have immediately changed your tune, Steve, because we've always been the group, we've been the gang, we've been the British front, the British Empire.
Yeah, but now you're the winner. No one likes the winner. Everyone likes the underdog. So now it's us.
I just want to be clear,
I'm really
Max.
sorry about that.
I've been saying for years how fickle he is. So welcome to the other side of that coin. I'm glad to have Steve back in my corner for the first time in 4 years.
Glory hunter, that's what he is. Now, quick question: where did you get that picture of me? And why did you even need a picture of half of my face for the show to run?
I'm going to be honest with you. It's because I didn't want to go to the trouble of setting up a two-person layout, even though like we have one somewhere, but I didn't have the files handy. So I thought it would be funnier to find a photo of you smiling nicely with your partner and then just blowing it up to a degree where it was extremely uncomfortable. If you guys didn't watch on YouTube, I pranked Max for not being here. It was pretty funny.
Is Cat in that picture somewhere?
Yeah, Cat's in it, but I wasn't going to put Cat in it. Because I'm not trying to mess with Cat, right?
Yeah,
like, Cat doesn't know me like that.
What I would have used is, the one that looks like Ross Kemp on Castles, and Max is like there in his like fucking North Face. All
right, okay, all right. I let the handbrake go for a solid 2 minutes, but we got to get into the show because we got plenty of topics to jump into here. We're gonna get into some updates that Valve has made, where they're gonna be giving players a warning about early access games that have potentially been abandoned, which is another one of those nice, pro player updates they've had. We're going to talk a little bit about Bloodborne potentially coming to the Steam Deck. But before we do that, we've got a comment that we want to follow up on from last week's show, and then a quick PSA for you. So we got a comment, over on YouTube who said, "Hi there, love the show and listen to every episode weekly via Spotify. Just wondering if you can confirm this for me. On the charging/battery life section of the latest episode, I was under the impression that the Steam Deck features a pass-through ability which allows it to be played while plugged in with the charger doing no damage or degradation to the battery. Is this not the case? Thanks." Steve, you looked this up. Let's give Funk Punk an answer here.
So it kind of works pretty much how I think most people would expect it to work. It's the same as to how a laptop would work, how a phone works, that it's charging the battery when it can. So if it's in use and it's drawing power and it's using that power, then it won't necessarily charge the battery. But if you just leave it in the dock and charge it up to 100%, it's going to maintain that battery at 100%. And then when you go to play it, the battery's still at 100% and it's drawing power from the mains and it's passing through. The problem comes from leaving a battery charged at 100%, just sitting there. That's the issue. And that was the reason why it looks like they're adding in the kind of charge limit in there.
So I guess maybe the confusion originates here from people using, and I probably used this term last week, like overcharging, right? But it's like really what it is like leaving a battery either fully charged or fully depleted impacts the life of the battery, whereas the best way to maintain the health of a battery in one of your devices is to regularly charge it and then deplete it and then charge it again.
And charge it not fully. Like that definitely increases the lifetime of the battery. I know that from my car. My car has an option to like charge fully to 100%, but most of the time only charge to 80%, and then the kind of battery of the car will last longer, supposedly. It's nice to see the option there. I think most people
dropping your electric car there, didn't you?
Oh yeah,
couldn't not.
Yeah, couldn't. I'm just doing my bit for the environment, Max.
It's not even a Tesla, and he hated them before it was cool to hate them. So Steve's an OG
Teslas.
electric vehicle guy. If there's anything he can brag about, my man's had an EV for 10 years.
Steve's a professional hater, actually. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, he is. But he hates the right stuff, which is why I like him.
Yeah. Is this, as someone who only listened to the first 30 seconds to hear the
As soon as I
hatred.
started hating on Max
I
was
was
out of that
off.
episode.
This was in the discussion about the new feature they're adding for the sort of you can set it to charge maximum up to like 8%.
Correct,
And still
yeah,
sit
yeah.
there. Okay, cool, good. I'm glad
Yeah.
that's I'm glad that was covered.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll listen to it at some point.
Yeah, it's a great show. You should check it out. Funk Punk, thanks for writing in, and glad you love the show. Appreciate it. And remember, if you guys want to write in with your thoughts, questions, any of that kind of stuff, you can run over to the YouTube like they did. You can comment over on Spotify. I've been realizing that we were getting comments over there now that they updated the interface. So if I missed your comment over there, I will start responding to them now.
How can we see? Can we all see that?
I can give them to you.
love
You
to see
have
the
the login.
comments.
If you want to log in and look at the comments, you can do that.
Yeah, sure.
And
I
then
love reading the comments.
And then, of course, if you head over to flipscreen.games, that's our website. We have an email address that you can email as well. So however you want to write into the show, we love to hear from you. All right, so let me get another quick PSA for you. This was a headline I saw over on Gaming on Linux earlier today, which is that there is a new beta that's forcing HDR on external displays for specifically the Steam Deck OLED. And I didn't get a chance to jump into this one too much, but I threw it to Steve to be like, this seems like a thing we're going to... You've talked a lot about your interest in HDR with Steam Deck, so you want to break this one down for us?
So it does the opposite, actually. By default, the OLED model is forced active in the current stable version. It's forced active on external displays. That's no longer the case.
HDR is forced on external. Okay.
Now that can be enabled and disabled per display. So if you plug it into your TV that supports HDR, you can turn that on. Or if you want to turn it off and not have HDR for that device, you can turn that off as well. So it's just a nice quality of life update that if your TV supports HDR or doesn't support HDR, you can now have the option to turn it on or off.
So talk to me about that. If say you have a display that doesn't support HDR, why would you want to turn HDR off?
So if it doesn't support HDR, it's going to look washed out. It's going to look terrible because the TV is not doing the tone mapping that the output expects. So the output that if you've ever seen an output of an HDR device on a standard dynamic range display, it's flat. It looks gray. It's got no contrast at all, and that's because there's a tone curve that's added to it, where the TV and the display has been calibrated by the manufacturer or by the user or by a professional calibrator to say when this black is displayed, it's going to be this specific brightness, and this white is going to be this specific brightness, that kind of thing. So that tone curve needs to be applied. It's a nice thing to be able to turn it on and off. I know some games say they support HDR, but the actual implementation is completely broken. So to be able to turn it off for the external display is really nice as well. So I'm glad to see the option there. Hopefully this means more improvements coming to the docked experience. I feel like maybe after the SteamOS beta comes out, we'll start seeing them focus a little bit more on those kind of things.
I was battling myself with, specifically with Moonlight, running Moonlight on my PC, and then or Sunshine on the PC, Moonlight on my TV, and this HDR is on here, but HDR isn't on here, or HDR is on here, and it gets turned on or turned off, and it was so confusing. So yeah, it'd be nice to not have that be forced. Also, you were saying about the colors. This week I was playing Dead Space on my nice OLED monitor. It looked amazing. I had all the lights off, and I was like taking screenshots of like, ooh, this is real creepy. This is real nice. Great. Yeah, and I opened them all up, and I was like, great. The atmosphere is gone. They are all washed out. Like the lighting's all buggered. Great. What a waste of time.
Yeah, it's good fun seeing HDR on an SDR display.
Mm-hmm.
So the next thing I wanted to jump into today was another move from Valve, which is kind of the latest in a line of a few like Steam, like native Steam features that they've been adding that are kind of trying to empower users and potential customers to make more informed decisions. Yeah. And I thought this was just a really great move from them and something I wanted to bring attention to, and also so that if you're out there playing that you'll know to look for this from now on. So basically we got this new feature that they just kind of rolled out quietly over the last week which will warn users how long it's been since a game that is marked as early access has had an update. So if the game hasn't been updated in a year, it'll basically have this notice warning players before they invest in it. And I think that this is something that like definitely makes a ton of sense when you think about like how many, stories we've had, especially lately, of early access games like coming out and, taking a bunch of people's money and then going away, and that leading to a, disappointed player base. And yeah, I mean, Valve wanting to, I think, do their due diligence to make sure that they are not setting up consumers to feel like they've been burned by buying a game that Valve allowed to be on their platform. It's good for both parties on that one,
I feel like the big catalyst for this has to be Kerbal Space Program 2, which, if I remember, it hasn't been updated in over a year. Like, so that the game came in early access, and then I think the developer was shut down, but the game is still available for £50 to buy on the Steam store, and it was just sat there in perpetuity. It was hadn't been updated in a couple of years at this point. The dev didn't exist anymore, so it was never going to happen. But the game also wasn't being taken down by the publisher. The publisher probably still exists. Publisher probably still takes all the money, but they have no intention of updating it. So I think this kind of thing is probably meant to deter people from buying that when, I don't think Valve has the right to take anything off the store like that. But
Kerbal doesn't even have the notice on it, for what it's worth. But
really,
it's still there, and it's private division. But man, the reviews are overwhelmingly negative on that game, and it looks like it hasn't had an update in a while.
Yeah, that's why. Yeah, because it hasn't been touched. It's been abandoned because the devs don't exist anymore. So yeah, not good.
So Steve, you mentioned the flag. Do you want to read the the notice we have here? Like what you'll actually see?
Yeah, so there's a new warning below the usual early access, it's not complete, yada, yada, yada. Now, if it's not been updated in, I don't think they've said specifically what time, but I would imagine it seems to be 12 months without an update.
Yeah, it looks like it. I think it automatically goes up after that amount of time.
Yeah. So
that seems reasonable, right?
Yeah.
Like that's like a pretty fair amount of time.
Yeah. I think so. And it says the last update made by the developers was over X amount of time ago. The information and timeline described by the developer here may no longer be up to date. So obviously developers post about when there's going to be updates, when there's going to be new content, what their plans for the 1.0 and the path to 1.0 is. Obviously, in the case of that Max has said with Kerbal Space Program, that those developers don't exist anymore. So how can they release an update unless Private Division decides to put someone else onto this project, which seems unlikely. But there's been, a lot of success with early access software. Hades, for example, was early access software. It's just the odd, I think, project.
Baldur's Gate 3, right, was like famously early access for a long time. Yeah, I don't think it's a early access is the problem inherently, right? Like I don't think any game that's in early access is like, like something you should be looking at sideways, but I do think that this is the kind of thing that like you want people to be able to make an informed decision without having to go do research, right? Like if Valve, they have the functionality in Steam where you get recommended software, right? So it's like if I get recommended Kerbal Space Program and I don't know that it's an early access or I know it's an early access, but I had a great experience with Baldur's Gate 3 or Hades or whatever. So I'm like, yeah, I'm safe to buy this game, right? I know the first one was really good. Like, why wouldn't this one come together, right? And then you pay for it, and then you find out that it's an abandoned game that you spent $50 for, or that's incomplete. Yeah, like that's going to leave you feeling burned, and it's going to lead to, probably a disproportionate amount of like negative user reviews and returns and just shit that Valve doesn't want to deal with. So it's like, it saves work on their end, but it also makes it so that you as somebody in the ecosystem is less likely to have a negative experience that makes you wary from supporting the next early access game. And I think that's the big thing is like you don't want the few bad apples to create a kind of chilling effect and make people feel like, yeah, like that game looks cool or whatever, but I don't want to support it in early access. I'll wait for 1.0. And then they don't make enough money to finish the game. That's why games go in early access usually, right? Is to fund finishing the game. And That's obviously produced a number of really great, memorable classics. And I would hate to see that as an option go away for people. And I think this is the best way to make it so people don't feel that way.
I agree.
I think there's a few other things they could do to improve it. I think they could do Valve could do with putting the last update date on the page. You have the release date, you have the early access release date, but you don't have the last update date. You have to click through to manually view the update history and scroll through and see when the last update was. It would be good to see, number of updates it's had and the last update when it happened, and you could then make the decision and go, oh, this hasn't been updated since last June, which is the case with Kerbal Space Program 2, then I go, well, I'm not going to buy it then if it's not had an update since June.
I think another thing that you could do is I think you could put the onus on the developers to need to hit a certain amount of communication, where like even if they don't have an update, because by this metric, it's like the game needs to have an update once a year. Otherwise, people are going to be dissuaded from purchasing it. So that incentivizes you to update the game once a year, which is obviously a good cadence for a game that's supposed to be in active development. I don't think that's unreasonable. But I think what I would also probably have some kind of requirement on is like, okay, like if you want to take advantage of our early access, program, like part of that is that you're, in the same way that like when you do a Kickstarter, right? Like you do that to get funding, and then therefore you owe your backers a certain amount of content or access, or
you never have to actually deliver on it though. Like, you can just like take the money and run if you want to.
Yeah, but not if you want to work
just say
again.
Something went wrong, and
I mean, I would say the number of people that have successfully done that and then gone on to still have careers is very few. You can do it
100%.
once.
Yeah.
But
there are a number of Kickstarters where I think people did it with the best intentions and it just still didn't come off because, we raised 5 million, but actually it was going to cost 50 million. Shenmue 3 was a great example of that in the video game space. They raised, I think, like 10 million from the Kickstarter. That game cost way more to make, and PlayStation ended up footing the bill, which is why it became an exclusive over there, just to finish the game off, because otherwise it never would have seen the light of day.
And I think that's the thing, right? Is like my whole point, and honestly, you bringing up the like failed Kickstarters is honestly a very analogous situation where it's like I think that you now have a culture where like people do look at Kickstarters a little bit like more
cautious about it. They're like, oh, that's never
more cautious than we used to be. And I think that like you want to ideally have a situation where yes, these tools exist. But if you're going to use them, like you need to be prepared to communicate with your audience more, to have a roadmap, to communicate when that roadmap changes, right? And not end up in a situation, and like not to bring in too many examples and complicate the narrative, but like I'm thinking about like what just happened with Multiversus, right? Where like that got, and that's a whole other thing. I just did a daily checkpoint about it on Patreon if you want to go check that out. Like part of the anger is that it was not communicated until the 11th hour, that it's like, oh, by the way, the game's dead and it's over in like 3 months, and if you have if you've invested in the founders pack and you've got tokens left over, it's burned. Like you are like, that's it, right? Like I do think that if the writing was on the wall for this sooner and you communicate that, you lessen the amount of ire that people have. And I do think that like when you look at, some of the more successful examples of stuff like this, right? Something like Baldur's Gate, that game got updated all the time. So you were never sitting there. Yeah, same with Hades. You were never sitting there worried that it wasn't coming along. And when you think of like the big Kickstarters, right, that like were successful, like Shovel Knight took a lot longer to finish all the content that they planned, but they under-promised and over-delivered, right? Like all of those DLCs became full-fledged campaigns. Like if you kickstarted that game for like $15 or whatever back in the day, you got an insane amount of value over the course of a decade. And it's like,
how about Hollow Knight though?
I mean,
have you got to see Silk Song?
I mean, that's one of those things too, though, right? Where it's like, I think the proof is kind of in the pudding there, right? Because it's like, if Silk Song is good, then yeah, you got that game for free. Because you kickstarted it like 12 years ago.
The value of Shovel Knight was also, Hollow Knight is also fantastic because, they released like 4 DLCs after the fact. That game cost like £11 to buy, even if you didn't kickstart it. And then you then got to benefit from all the Kickstarter stuff. Like those are two examples of like like when you talk of like Hades as an early access title, Baldur's Gate as an early access title, proving that works. For Kickstarter, you have the same with Shovel Knight, Hollow Knight. You know, the Knights.
Yeah, all the night games. And with Yacht Club, right? Like their new game that they're working on, Mina the Hollower, right? Like I jumped on that Kickstarter day one because I know that they're going to deliver. And guess what? There's a blog post every month telling me where they are in the process. Yeah. And they have a Discord where they're always doing like, oh, we're live streaming the current version of the game. Like I can check in and see that my investment is playing out. And I think that is something I could see maybe becoming something that Steam requires of like, look, you got to communicate with the audience once a month or something like that. Or like, you know, like you're going to hit a point where like, we're going to flag that this is a game that you shouldn't invest in, you know, in the same way that this does, you know, have some kind of thing where it's like, oh, this developer promised a roadmap and then they didn't meet those, you know, it's like literally like fact check it. It's like, oh, here's the roadmap we listed. Did they achieve any of those goals? Or, you know, like that's, you know, maybe just what we need to start thinking about on a storefront level a little bit more, is like taking the responsibility off of you, the consumer, to go and do research on whether or not this game is actually a game, or are you buying vaporware, you know?
Yeah. I mean, worst case scenario, you get a refund. That's the good thing about Steam, right? I refunded The Sims this week because it doesn't play great on Steam Deck. So it's like that option's there.
Playable though.
It's playable. You don't really want to play it because without keyboard and mouse, that game does not translate very well.
No, I bet.
You don't say.
I had it on PS2. Worked phenomenally with a controller.
That was a totally different version of the game, though.
They could easily bring that game over. I'm probably just going to download that game and emulate it instead.
Yeah. Okay. I don't want to get off on a tangent because we got to talk about Bloodborne in a second, but you teed me up for an anecdote that I love to share. So that version of that game, like the PlayStation 2 version of The Sims, I had that. I think I borrowed it from a friend, and I remember having this like, it's like one of my like core gaming memories of. There's a story mode, right? You start off like living in your mom's house, and then like you move out to your first spot. And I remember my character was like, my bills were behind, the house is dirty. He's like got his coworker out in front of the house, beeping the horn that like it's time to get in the carpool. And my sim was just like sitting on the couch crying. And I was just like sitting there just like, man, being an adult is hard. Like this is rough. And then my sim had to move back in with his mom and I stopped playing.
Oh, that's just how real life works, isn't it, really?
Yeah. That's why you play on PC and you get the Rosebud cheat so that you can be rich.
There's a glitch in the PS2 version that we found. You can sell the same piece of wall 1,000 times. So what we used to do is we'd put the most expensive wallpaper on it. So then when you sold that piece of wall, it was really expensive. And you could just keep pressing R2 and sell that.
And then you could get to the mansion with the chimp butler that I never got to.
I just used to use that as like architecture of the game. I spent hours just making houses in that game.
Oh, so you're also neurodivergent. Interesting.
One day I'll get Kat on and she can explain how many like dozens and hundreds of hours she plays. She spends modding The Sims versus the 2 hours she ends up playing it for.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That's a fun conversation.
I mean, I'll tell you what, man. I think Sarah would love to do that. Let's get the two of them on here one week and we can just fuck off.
Partner week. Partner week.
All right. So Max, this is one that you've been wanting to talk about for a couple of weeks. We finally got some space for it. Let's talk about Bloodborne on Steam Deck.
So first thing I'd like to do is issue a correction. At the beginning of this episode, you said potential that Bloodborne is coming to Steam Deck. That's what you said. Now, the reality of it is that Bloodborne is on Steam Deck, is already on Steam Deck, and I've been playing it on Steam Deck. That is the whole point of this topic. Is
not officially, Pete.
Not officially, Pete.
Gotcha.
I'll get there.
Gotcha. So, well, I don't know. This is your. I feel like this episode, I'm just like, I don't know what we're talking about. You talk about it. Tell me what we're talking about.
Podcast. It's like, Steve, what are we talking about? So, I'll be Steve now. I've got the Steve.
Yeah, I just get this.
I've got the Steve balls. Now I'm Steve. So, last year, tail end of last year, EmuDeck got an update adding Shad PS4, which is a PS4 emulator. That was added to EmuDeck, the same way that all the other ones do. You just download it, run it, works really well. Now, one thing about the PS4 and its library is that all of its best games are sort of available on Steam now. You know, Spider-Man, Ghost of Tsushima, God of War, Horizon, Uncharted, The Last of Us, yada yada yada. So the only reason that you could ever want to use Shad PS4 to play PS4 games on your Steam Deck or on PC is to play Bloodborne, right? There's no other reason to do it.
There's one other game
Blood-
I can think of, I think, which is
Go
the
on.
Uncharted collection. If you wanted to play it, because they
2,
inexplicably
3.
put the
Yeah.
last game in the franchise on
Yeah.
PC, and none of the games that are heavily referenced throughout that game. So I guess
is
that's the
fair.
other one. But that's
Then
still
maybe
that's two.
there's a team working on that. But I don't care about Uncharted because I love Bloodborne. I played it through, so I played
Fair
it for
enough.
the first time in like 2021, I think. Played it through twice since then. I've got the platinum. It's sort of like a From Software high point, but famously, as we all know, it's trapped on the PS4. Hasn't had any kind of updates in about 9 years.
Does it have a warning on the page when I go?
No, it doesn't. This game hasn't received an update in 9 years. Don't bother.
Can you imagine if like every video game, it's like you go to my like Street Fighter, it hasn't been updated in 30 years. Don't bother.
A year ago, you know, Shad PS4's been around for a little while, but a year ago, Bloodborne wasn't even booting. You couldn't even get it to show anything. You know, over the last year, we've seen like, oh, here's the vague outline of some characters. Here's this without shading. Here's this, blah 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 blah. But you know, it wasn't even booting. So over the last year, we've watched it happen, and you know, the state it's in now is really, really impressive. It's always been a tragedy that Bloodborne has been trapped exclusively on a system where it only runs at 30 FPS and at 720p. So the rest of this sort of story I've got to tell you here for this segment of the show is about me desperately trying to play Bloodborne on the deck in 480p at around 25 FPS. So it's kind of worth it. But yeah, anyway, I should say this isn't going to be a guide, but I will probably be explaining every single step I take in great detail. So if you want to use it as a guide,
really
feel free
quickly,
to.
it's
go on.
extremely funny to me that this anecdote is preceded by you saying it's just such a tragedy that it's been locked on a console where it's locked at 30, and you're like, so I learned how to play it at 25.
I've put probably more hours than the developers put. No, I'm joking. I've put loads of time into this but it, you know, anyway. So the first step of this was installing Shad PS4. Like I said, it's part of EmuDeck. Easy enough. If you haven't already updated your EmuDeck, go on EmuDeck, update it. You'll have Shad PS4 added. Easily enough. So you had to just get yourself a copy of Bloodborne, which obviously the only way to do that is to use your modded PS4, rip the game disc, and then sort of, you know, the one that you definitely own, and then transfer that to your Steam Deck, right? There's no other way to get it. That's the only way to get it. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. So when you have that copy of Bloodborne, I was quite surprised at how easy it was to actually install the game. Like, usually you just run the game, you know, like with the Switch emulator or more modern emulators, or even any emulator, really. You put the ROM in the folder and it picks it up, and that's it. But with Shad PS4, you have to install it like a PS4 game. You have to go in and say, I install 1.0,
Really?
then I install, they go to the update, install the update, install the DLC, and it's sort
You
of
have
like
to install like the SDK from or the software update, similar to our PCS3, right? You have to download the software
Yes.
image from PlayStation in order to be able to play anything.
yeah. So not for in terms of like the actual PS4 software or the game.
Yeah, like do you have to download the PS4?
No.
software?
The Shad PS4 comes as is, seems to work absolutely fine. There's no BIOS needed. There's nothing like that needed. You just need to install the games.
Seems legit.
I don't know what's going on in there, but it hasn't been shut down yet, so it can't be that bad. But you just install the individual elements, and what it does is it unpacks them into what essentially looks like a PC installation folder. So you sort of navigate through, do it all. If you're doing this on Steam Deck, don't do what I did, which is spend the first sort of hour and a half of this trying to install it, going, oh, it's crashed, quitting out, going back in, going, oh no, it installed, booting up the game crashed, and you go, I'll try it again. And then every time you do the same thing, you don't learn your lesson, but what you actually need to do is just sit, be patient and wait, and it will eventually install itself. What I was doing was quitting out halfway through and then trying to load up an incomplete installation. Don't do that. Let it happen. Now, the fact that you've got this sort of like folder of files means that we can start modding it, which is very, very important for being able to get this game to even boot, play, let alone make it actually playable. Or if you're playing it on more powerful hardware, making it look prettier, making it look better than it did on PS4. That just doesn't happen on the Steam Deck, just to warn you. There are sort of some mods that are like you need to have this mod installed, otherwise, as soon as the game loads, like your character's face like explodes and grows and grows and grows, and then the game crashes because there's like this gigantic polygon that it doesn't know what to deal with. Which I luckily didn't see, but I've seen screenshots of it, and it's quite ridiculous. But it's basically it's very simple. You just go on Nexus Mods, you find the mods you need, and drop them into the files like you would modding like an old PC game. So like how nowadays you can sort of inject mods through different ways on PC. This is very much like modding an old PC game where you just take the file, you drag it in, and you just replace a bunch of files inside the installation folder. So there's a lot that I had to do to get it to run on the Steam Deck, and that is sort of FPS boosting mods that take all of the grass, lighting, post-processing effects, all the nice bits that sort of take a lot of effort, or like take a lot of processing power. They all get removed. You have to sort of use a mod that reduces the cloth physics. So when you move around, you're sort of like your body's cloth moves, enemies' cloth moves. You are rigid, and your arms do sort of clip through these models. Now they don't have physics attached to them, so like there is it doesn't look as good as it can do. You have to remove the dynamic shadows. You have to download a mod that reduces the resolution. There's sort of a series of mods that reduces the or it increases it up to like 4K, but don't fucking try that. And then there's also ones that like lock the frame rate to 30, 60, whatever. Again, we have to use 30 FPS for this, but it doesn't quite work. And there's also Xbox UI, so you can just replace the PS4 buttons with Xbox buttons. So when you're in the menus and stuff like that, it's what you expect. And that's what I always love it when games do that. I remember when Metroid Dread, when I started playing Metroid Dread on Steam Deck, the ability to actually have it say press B to do this, press A to go back, which I know doesn't make any sense, but having that button there made it easier for me to go, oh yeah, instead of accidentally doing what I always do, which is press the button I didn't mean.
Yeah, I tried getting Henry to play Mario Kart Wii on the Steam Deck because it's like his favorite Mario Kart. And he just his brain couldn't fathom that the buttons were the wrong way around, and they weren't what they said on the button. And I was like, no, A is B, B is A.
Yeah, it doesn't make it's really annoying, and I get it, but it gets on my nerves. It's weird when I play like Metro Prime Trilogy, and it's like press RT to go forward, and it's because that would have been the A button. So I'm like navigating yes with RT, which is bizarre. Anyway, we've just done all these mods to Bloodborne, right? All of these sort of things to make it run like treacle and look like shit, just to make it playable.
Was it worth it?
Well, there's still a few more hurdles to get through, it turns out, because there are a number of files that like...
Joys of PC gaming, everybody.
Yeah, man. So there are certain boss attacks and certain like sound effects and like visual effects that if they are loaded into the game just crashes. There's no way of getting around it. It just doesn't not know what to do with that, and it just crashes the CPU. The only way to get around it is you have to download the fixed version of each of those damaged files and then put them in the right place. And there are like 15 of them, so that took fucking ages. Navigating on the Steam Deck UI, like, yeah, cool, unpack that, extract that, yeah, put that in the right folder, yeah, blah, 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 blah. So even after doing all of that, and I ended up doing it twice because I did it on PC as well, I still ended up encountering.
Could you not just use the same install and put it on like a USB stick and transfer it over?
Yeah, maybe.
That's probably what I would have done.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe I could. I don't think I have a USB. Yeah, but I do have a. Yeah. Yeah, maybe. All right, cool. Thanks, Steve. I'll remember that. I'll remember that next time I do something like this.
I'm just over here resisting the urge because I just remember when Max like made a point of it earlier or like last year. It's like, yeah, I got rid of the PlayStation. I just don't really have any need for it. It's like you could have just streamed this from your PlayStation.
No,
you could have just used Jockey.
Right, you can't. Let me get there. So. Even after doing all of that twice, every time you hit, there's a crow enemy in the first area of the game, and every time I hit it, the game would crash every single time. And I don't know why. I was still like, oh, there's a crow. And I would hit, and I would go, oh, shit, yeah. And it would crash every single time. And I'd go, all right, that's time for another time. And I'd be, oh, crow. And I'd hit it every time. Anyway, so after all of that, the game does run on Steam Deck, right? It's very low resolution. It's got a very cinematic frame rate. Positive about that. It's very unstable, and it's probably not playable from start to finish yet. But I actually do think it's one of the most if you just said to me when the Steam Deck first came out, like, oh, what's like a dream for this? You'd be like, oh, I'd love to be able to play Bloodborne on this. Like, I'd love to be able to play Bloodborne on PC in general, but to be able to sort of have handheld Bloodborne is amazing. And even though it, doesn't work, and it took me hours and hours of trial and error, and I'm sure there probably was a guide that would have told me to do all of this, but I was working this all out for myself, just like
sometimes that's the best way.
Yeah, I'm
Get
sure,
that sense of accomplishment at the end.
I remember when I first posted like the video in a group of mates of me playing for, I don't know, it was like a 30-second clip of me going, that's me running in 30 FPS, by the way. And someone was like, oh, mate, drop the link. And I was like, I wish I could. There is no link. This is hours of my own work. And if you want me to explain it, I will. But like, you'll have to I'll have me talk it at you. So maybe you can just listen to this episode now. That's great. Even though I don't actually think there's anything to learn here. But anyway,
I've got to say, Max, I'm very impressed at all your work. It does not sound like it's maybe worth it.
No, on Steam Deck, absolutely not. Not right now. I've shown it to friends, and it's more of like a fascination thing. However, when I went through the whole thing again on PC, and it was much easier on PC because I had a mouse and keyboard to do it with, and I wasn't just doing it with my hands and my thumbs. I was able to get it running at 1440p, 60 FPS, and I got a couple of drops. OLED monitor, it's incredible, right? It's a good frame rate. It looks good. You can sort of like, even though you have to remove some of the post-processing effects for it to work, you can then sort of reshade to add them back in. The game looks better than it did on PlayStation. It plays better than it did on PlayStation. It's got Xbox controls, blah, 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 blah. And that is the version that I'm streaming to my Steam Deck, because it's very easy to set the sort of e-boot file as the shortcut in Steam, so that when I click on a Bloodborne icon on my Steam library, it boots Bloodborne straight away as if it was a game on my PC, and that is incredible. This might have all been in vain, though, seeing as we've had some recent news. So one of the mods for Bloodborne that I ended up using is Lance McDonald's 60 FPS Bloodborne mod. He created it in 2021 for PS4 or PS4 Pro. If you modded your PS4, you could sort of do it. I think he told us an anecdote once about meeting is it Yoshida? Is that the guy's name? Who's the PlayStation guy? Him. Yes, he met him in a lift once, and was like, "Oh, hey, I made Bloodborne." Apparently, he just like laughed, like really, really laughed at him. Like as in, I made the 60 FPS mod, and the guy just laughed at him. Anyway, that has been taken down by Sony. Sony has sent a DMCA takedown notice to Lance McDonald saying this mod needs to go away now. And the same thing also happened to, I don't know if you guys remember when we spoke about fan games and freeware and stuff like that on the Steam Deck. We spoke about Bloodborne PSX, the Bloodborne demake, like a PS1 game version of Bloodborne that sort of runs from the start of the game.
Yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah, it was really cool. Yeah. Runs up to the first sort of like major boss of the game. That has also been taken down sort of in the following days. So that's 2 projects this week, 2 Bloodborne projects that have existed for the last few years.
4 years for that 60 FPS mod.
Yeah, with no issue. And now they've been shut down. PS4 hasn't had that notice. It's those 2, that specific mod, that specific Bloodborne remake, which is probably the first time, other than maybe Bloodborne Kart. I remember Bloodborne Kart had to change to themselves to Nightmare Kart. They had to sort of rebrand a little bit. But do these things potentially mean that Bloodborne is getting some sort of remaster? Yeah, you think
it's the 10th anniversary next month?
It is the 10th anniversary.
So it feels like time.
Also, like with these things having existed for all this time, it's like, why would they be getting?
It's Metroid Dread again, and not Metroid Dread.
No, it's
right?
the 2
another Metroid 2 remake.
Yeah, that was like coming out right at the same time before they announced. Whatever the last one on 3DS was, Returns.
Samus Returns.
Yeah. So I think it's 100% that. And also it's like when you start kind of going through, I mean, you just did this earlier, Max, right? It's like, how many exclusive PlayStation 4 games are there left to bring to PC? There's not that many. I mean, there are some, right? Like I thought of a couple more, right? Like we haven't gotten
Gravity Rush is one.
Right, Gravity Rush, and
the servers turned off in about like 6 minutes by Sony.
Yeah. But then there's
There's a lot of the racing games as well. Like,
Infamous. That's what I was thinking of.
yeah,
that was one of the
yeah.
early like exclusives on PS4. There's like there are
Killzone, Pete's favorite.
Of course, everyone knows. I'll never live that time. Made one comment about Killzone.
Remember Haze, PS3 exclusive Haze? That never made it over, did it?
Well, I'm not saying that there are no PlayStation, but you know what I mean. Like they're
Heaven Sword.
Not many. To your point.
Yeah.
And they're even less on PlayStation 5, right? So it's like...
Well, I think Demon Souls was one of those ones that, like, the first trailer for Demon Souls, it was, like, also coming to PC, and then they changed that trailer, took it down, and then it was included in the leak, the NVIDIA leak, and then Returnal happened, and then Ratchet and Clank happened, and then Gran Turismo, Ghost of Tsushima, yada, yada, yada. Still no Demon Souls. So maybe they'll do like a big, hey, we've got Bloodborne and Demon Souls coming to PC now.
I can imagine they will, yeah. I mean, they own the studio that did the Demon Souls port now, so it makes sense. Why not get Bluepoint on Bloodborne?
Yeah. Better than getting them on a live service God of War game, that's for sure.
And then after that, pop them on Knack, because we really need that on.
We are desperate for more Knack.
Yeah, we don't have Knack or Knack 2. Who could forget?
Yeah.
So I mean, like it makes sense, right? Like I think it feels long overdue anyway. Like, you know, the hunger for From Software titles has only increased since that game came out. You know, it was a big deal when it came out, but I think, you know, if it came out now, it would be like the biggest selling games of the year, right? Like it'd be a game of the year contender. So it's like,
oh, absolutely.
It just, it definitely seems overdue. And when you think of like, you know, them wanting to, you know, they've talked about wanting to like monetize these games on PC and like get more return, right? It's like, I mean, Bloodborne will sell a ton of copies, right? For a very old game that all you need to do is port it. It's like, yeah, like it seems crazy that it hasn't happened yet.
Re-release at the same time, you know, I feel like you can milk people for money.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, like I think that's one of those situations where that doesn't even seem crazy to me. Because like we talked about this with like, you know, like there is a contingency of folks that like do not like the like fact that we got a Last of Us remake yet again after there was already a remaster of a game that's like not that old, right? And it's like the same thing happened with Horizon. And like we talked about like the financials of those and like why those games are probably a lot cheaper to produce, why it helps keep people employed during a down period, and that ultimately like it's probably not for the person that's actually played the game before, it's for the person who it's new to. I mean, for Bloodborne, that's probably a lot of people. Think about how much better Elden Ring sold than, you know, Dark Souls and Bloodborne.
Yeah,
and those...
Elden Ring was like a gateway for a lot of people's Souls
like...
games, myself included, and I'd love to go back and play Bloodborne. And what's the other one that you said I should play, like the samurai style one?
Sekiro. Oh, you should play Sekiro.
I don't think it's at all an exaggeration to say that there are probably literally millions of players that would be interested in Bloodborne now that were not interested in it or not aware of it when it initially came out. So that game getting a re-release for its 10th anniversary, right? Like to come on PC and then get a fresh shot on PS5. It's like, yeah, it just makes sense. I think it would be a really weird decision to not do that. Unless you have From Software being like actively like trying to make it not happen. Right? No, but that's the point though, right? It's like unless there's some reason that like you don't want to do it for like bad blood or something, you know, it's like unless there's some weird X factor, it's like why the hell did you wait 10 years to print more money?
There was the rumor that they were looking to buy the parent company of FromSoft.
Yeah,
so
right.
If Sony goes through with that acquisition, then there's kind of no reason not to. You can do what you want. You own all of their IP at that point.
Yeah.
So why not?
Yeah, we'll see. But I definitely think this is real. I would be genuinely surprised if it's not announced this year.
I think it's going to be a shadow drop next month. I think they'll do it for the 10th anniversary. It'll be like.
That would be so sick. Like that would be so cool, you know? And like obviously like I'm not a big Souls guy, but just like as a, you know, observer, right? It's like, oh my god, dude, like people would lose their goddamn minds if they're just like, by the way, it's out on Steam right now. It's like, oh my god, people will be so stoked.
Also, you just want me to be happy, right?
Yeah, of course I do.
Okay, good. Yeah,
of course. Yeah, so Max, I'm glad to hear about your journey. I don't know that it was a good use of your time, but
Not on Steam Deck, but on PC, I had a great time, and I'm going to continue to have a great time.
okay. Well, there you go.
I'm pointing aggressively at
You
you.
can then stream from your PC to your Steam Deck, right? Job done.
Yeah.
Moonlight it
Sorted.
over. When
Moonlight
you're playing it
over.
at 60 FPS, which was never possible before.
Yeah. And it doesn't the original 60 FPS was the game would run super quick and you'd be like, hoo, hoo, hoo. Whereas now it just works. It just works.
So there you go. Speaking of just working, so does this segue. Show's over. Hey, so guess what? We got a website. You can go over there. Flipscreen.games. That's where you'll find links to all of the other podcasts that we do. Remember, if you want to let us know what you thought about this week's show, or if you want to get your thoughts read on the air, you want to write in with a question, just like Funk Punk did at the top of the show, you can hit us up over there to drop a line. You can jump down in the comments. If you're over on YouTube, please remember to give us a like, share this episode with a friend, and click that notification bell so that you know when the next episode goes live. If you're an audio listener, please take a second to go give us a review on wherever you get your podcasts. It really helps the show get circulated. For the crew, I've been Pete. He's been Steve. Over there's been Max. We'll see you next week.